Continuing where I left off, Chapter 13. That same night, after taking leave of the Minister of War, Bolkonsky set out to join the army, not knowing where he would find it, and apprehensive of being captured by the French on the road to Krems. At Brunn, everyone connected with the court was packing to leave, and the heavy baggage had already been dispatched to Olmutz. Near Etzeldorf, Prince Andrei came onto the road along which the Russian army was moving with great haste and in the greatest possible disorder. The road was so obstructed with baggage wagons that to get through in a carriage was out of the question. After obtaining a horse and Cossack from a Cossack commander, Prince Andrei left the baggage wagons behind him and, tired and hungry, rode ahead in search of the commander-in-chief and his own baggage. The most ominous rumors concerning the condition of the army reached him as he went along, and the appearance of troops in disorderly flight confirmed them. That Russian army, which has been brought from the ends of the earth by English gold, we shall force to undergo the same fate, the fate of the army at Ulm. He remembered these words from Bonaparte's injunction to his army at the beginning of the campaign, and they aroused in him amazement at the genius of his hero, a feeling of wounded pride, and the hope of glory. And should there be nothing left but to die, he thought, well, if need be, I shall do it no worse than another. Prince Andrei looked with disdain at the endless, confused mass of detachments, baggage wagons, artillery units, and again wagons, carts, vehicles of every possible kind, overtaking one another and blocking the muddy road, sometimes 3 or 4 abreast. From all sides, before and behind, as far as the ear could reach, there was the rattle of wheels, the rumble of wagons, carts, gun carriages, the crack of whips, thud of hoofbeats, shouts of the drivers, and the swearing of soldiers, orderlies, and officers. All along the sides of the road there were fallen horses, some of them flayed, broken down wagons, beside which sat solitary soldiers waiting for something. All the soldiers, separated from their companies, and setting off in crowds for neighboring villages, or returning from them, dragging sheep, fowls, hay, and bulging sacks. At each incline of the road the crowds became denser, and the din of shouting was incessant. Soldiers floundering knee-deep in mud clutched at cannons and wagons, which whips cracked, hoofs slipped, traces broke, and lungs were split with shouting. The officers directing the movement rode back and forth between the carts. Their voices were barely audible above the general uproar, and their faces show that they despair of checking this disorder. Here is our dear Russian Orthodox army, thought Bolkonsky, recalling Bilbin's words. He rode up to a convoy, intending to ask where the commander-in-chief was. Directly opposite him moved a strange one-horse vehicle, apparently rigged up by soldiers out of whatever material was at hand, and looking like something between a cart, a cabriolet, and a calash. A soldier was driving it, and behind the apron, under a leather hood, sat a woman wrapped in shawls. Prince Andrei rode up and had just started to address his question to a soldier when his attention was diverted by the desperate shrieks of this woman. The officer in charge of the convoy had struck the soldier driving the woman's vehicle for trying to get ahead of the others, and his whip had fallen on the apron. She screamed piercingly. Seeing Prince Andrei, she leaned out of the vehicle, thrust her thin arms out from under her shawl, and waving them about, cried, "Adjutant! Mr. Adjutant! For God's sake, protect me! What will become of us? I am the wife of the doctor of the 7 Chasseurs. They won't let us pass. We have been left behind and have lost our people." "I'll flatten you to a pancake. Turn back," shouted the infuriated officer to the soldier. "Turn back with your slut." "Mr. Adjutant, protect me. What will happen to us?" screamed the doctor's wife. "Kindly let this cart pass." "Don't you see there's a woman in it?" said Prince Andrei, riding up to the officer. The officer glanced at him, and without replying, again turned to the soldier. "I'll teach you back!" "Let them pass, I tell you," repeated Prince Andrei, compressing his lips. "And who are you?" the officer said, suddenly turning on him in a drunken rage. "Who are you anyway? Do you think you're in command here? I'm in command, not you. Get back," he repeated, "or I'll flatten you into a pancake." The officer evidently liked this expression. "He told that little adjutant off, all right," came a voice from behind. Prince Andrei saw that the officer was in that state of blind, drunken rage when a man does not know what he is saying. He also saw that his defense of the doctor's wife in the queer conveyance had exposed him to what he dreaded more than anything in the world, ridicule. But he was prompted by instinct. Scarcely had the officer finished the phrase when Prince Andrei, his face distorted with fury, rode up to him and raised his riding whip. "Kindly let them pass!" The officer waved his arm and quickly rode off. "It's all the fault of those fellows, those staff officers, that there's all this disorder," he snarled. "Do as you like." Prince Andrei, without raising his eyes, hastily rode away from the doctor's wife, who was calling him her savior. As he galloped on toward the village, where he was told the commander-in-chief was to be found, he recalled with disgust the minutest details of the scene. On reaching the village, he dismounted and went to the first house he came to, intending to eat something and rest if only for a moment, and to clarify his galling, humiliating thoughts. "That's not an army, it's a mob," he thought. He was walking toward the window of the house when a familiar voice called him by name. He looked up. Nevsky's handsome face was thrust out of the little window, his moist lips moving as he chewed on something. He beckoned to Prince Andrei. "Bolkonsky, Bolkonsky, can't you hear me? Come, quick!" he shouted. Prince Andrei went into the house, where he found Nevsky and another adjutant having something to eat. They instantly asked him if he had any news. Their faces, so familiar to him, revealed their agitation and alarm. This was particularly noticeable on Nevsky's usually laughing countenance. "Where is the commander-in-chief?" asked Bolkonsky. "He's here, in that house," answered the adjutant. "Well, is it true about the peace capitulation?" asked Nevsky. "I was going to ask you. I know nothing except that it was all I could do to get here. And what we've been through, my boy. Awful. I was wrong to laugh at Mac. What's happening to us is still worse, said Nevesky. But sit down and eat something. You won't find your baggage or anything else now, Prince, and God only knows where your man Pyotr is, said the other adjutant. And where are headquarters? We are to spend the night in Znaim. I've loaded everything I needed on 2 horses, said Nevesky, and fine packs they made for me. I could make off and cross the Bohemian highlands. It's bad, my boy. But what's the matter with you? You must be ill. Shivering like that, said Nevesky, noticing that Prince Andrei winced as at an electric shock. It's nothing, replied Prince Andrei. He had just recalled at that moment his recent encounter with the doctor's wife and the convoy officer. What is the commander-in-chief doing here? He asked. I have no idea, said Nevesky. Well, I know one thing. It's all vile, vile, simply vile, said Prince Andrei, and he went off to the house where the commander-in-chief was. Passing by Kutuzov's carriage, the exhausted saddle horses of his suite, and the Cossacks loudly taking among themselves, Prince Andrei went into the entry. Kutuzov, he was told, was inside with Prince Bagration and Weyrather. Weyrather was the Austrian general who had replaced Schmidt after he was killed. In the entry, little Kozlovsky was squatting on his heels in front of a clerk. The clerk, with the cuffs of his uniform turned back, was hastily writing at an inverted tub. Kozlovsky looked exhausted. He too had apparently not slept all night. He glanced at Prince Andrei, but did not even nod to him. Second line, have you written that? He asked, and continued dictating to the clerk. The Kiev Grenadiers, the Podolya. I can't go so fast, Your Honor, said the clerk with an angry, disrespectful look at Kozlovsky. Kutuzov's voice, sounding excited and displeased, could be heard through the door. An unfamiliar voice interrupted him. From the sounds of these voices and the inattentive way Kozlovsky glanced at him, from the disrespectful manner of the harassed clerk, and the fact that Kozlovsky and the clerk were sitting on the floor at a tub so near to the commander-in-chief, while the Cossacks holding the horses were boisterously laughing under the window. Prince Andrei felt that something important and disastrous was about to happen. He importunately questioned Kozlovsky. One moment, Prince, said Kozlovsky. Dispositions for Bagration. What about capitulation? There has been no question of capitulation. Orders have been issued for battle. Prince Andrei went toward the door from whence the voices came. Just as he was about to open it, the voices within ceased. The door opened, and Kutuzov, with his puffy face and aquiline nose, appeared on the threshold. Though Prince Andrei was standing directly in front of him, the expression in the commander-in-chief's single eyes showed him to be so deeply engrossed in his thoughts and anxieties that he was so oblivious to all else. He looked straight into this adjutant's face without recognizing him. Well, have you finished? He asked Kozlovsky. One moment, Your Excellency. Bagration, a gaunt, middle-aged man of medium height, with a resolute, impassive face of Eastern type, came out after the commander-in-chief. I have the honor to report, said Prince Andrei, for the second time, speaking in a rather loud voice, and handling the envelope to Kutuzov. Ah, from Vienna. Very good. Later. Kutuzov went out to the steps with Bagration. Well, Prince, goodbye, he said to Bagration. Christ be with you. My blessing on you in your great endeavor. Kutuzov's face suddenly softened. and there were tears in his eyes. He drew Bagration to him with his left hand, and with the right, on which he wore a ring, made a sign of the cross over him with a gesture that was clearly habitual, and offered his puffy cheek, but Bagration kissed him on the neck instead. "Christ be with you," Kutuzov repeated, and went toward his carriage. "Get in with me," he said to Bolkonsky. Your Excellency, I should like to be of use here. Permit me to remain with Prince Bagration's detachment." "Get in," said Kutuzov, and observing that Prince Andrei hesitated, he added, "I need good officers myself. I need them myself." They got into the carriage and drove for a few minutes in silence. "There is still much before us. A great deal lies ahead," he said, as if with an old man's perspicacity he understood what was going on in Pogosky's soul. "If 1/10 of his detachment gets there tomorrow, I shall thank God," he added, as if speaking to himself. Prince Andrei glanced at Kutuzov's face, not a foot distant from him, and involuntarily noticed the empty eye socket and the well-washed grooves of the scar near his temple, where, at Ismail, a bullet had pierced his skull. "Yes," he thought, "he has the right to speak so calmly of the loss of those men. That is why I asked to be sent with that detachment," he said. Kutuzov did not reply. He seemed to have forgotten what he had been saying, and sat plunged in thought. 5 minutes later, gently swaying on the pliant carriage springs, he turned to Prince Andrei. There was not a trace of agitation on his face. With delicate irony, he questioned him about the details of his interview with the Emperor, about the comments he had heard at courts concerning the Krem's engagement, and about certain ladies of their acquaintance. Chapter 14. On November 1st, Kutuzov had reached information through one of his spies indicating that the army he commanded was in an almost hopeless position. The spy reported that the French, after crossing the bridge at Vienna, were advancing in tremendous force upon Kutuzov's line of communication with the troops that were coming from Russia. If Kutuzov decided to stop at Krems, Napoleon's army of 150,000 would cut him off completely and surround his exhausted army of 40,000 men, and he would find himself in the position of Mack at Ulm. If he decided to abandon the road connecting him with the troops arriving from Russia, he would have to march, and with no road, into the unknown parts of the Bohemian highlands, defending himself against the superior forces of the enemy and relinquishing all hope of communication with Buxhowden. If Kutuzov decided to retreat along the road from Krems to Olmutz to join the forces coming from Russia, he risked being forestalled by the French, who had crossed the bridge at Vienna, and encumbered by all his baggage and transport, being forced to give battle on the march against an enemy 3 times as strong, who would hem him in front and from 2 sides. Kutuzov chose the latter course. The spy reported that the French, having crossed the Vienna bridge, were advancing by forced marches toward Znaim, which lay 100 versts ahead on Kutuzov's line of retreat. To reach Znaim before the French offered the greatest hope of saving the army. To let the French get there before him meant the certain exposure of his entire army to a disgrace such as that at Ulm, or to a general rout. But to forestall the French with his whole army was impossible. Their road from Vienna to Znaim was shorter and better than the Russians' roads from Krems to Znaim. The night he received this information, Kutuzov sent Bagration's advance guard of 4,000 men to the right across the hills from the Krems-Znaim road to the Vienna-Znaim road. Bagration was to make his march without resting, to halt facing Vienna with Znaim to his rear end, and, in the event that he succeeded in forestalling the French, to fight a delaying action for as long as possible. Kutuzov himself, with all his transport units, was heading straight for Znaim. Marching 45 versts on a stormy night after roadless hills with hungry soldiers in dilapidated shoes, and losing a third of his men as stragglers on the way, Bagration reached Hollabrunn on the Vienna-Zane road a few hours ahead of the French, who were approaching Hollabrunn from Vienna. Kutuzov, with his transport, still had to march some days before he could reach Znaim. Consequently, in order to save the army, Bagration, with his 4,000 hungry, exhausted soldiers, would have to hold off for days the entire enemy army confronting him at Hollabrunn, which was manifestly impossible. But a freak of fate made the impossible possible. The success of the trick that had placed the Vienna Bridge in the hands of the French without a battle incited Murat to attempt a similar deception with Kutuzov. Encountering Bagration's weak detachment on the Znaim road, he thought it was Kutuzov's whole army. In the hope of completely crushing this army, he waited for the troops who were still on their way from Vienna, and with this object offered a 3 days truce on condition that both the armies should not alter their positions, but remain where they were. Murat asserted that negotiations for peace were now underway, and that he was proposing the truce to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Count Nostitz, the Austrian general occupying the advanced posts, believed Murat's truce emissary and retired, leaving Bagration's detachment exposed. Another emissary rode to the Russian line to make the same announcement of peace negotiations and to offer the Russian army a 3 days truce. Bagration replied that he was not authorized either to accept or to refuse a truce, and sent his adjutant to Kosovo with a report of the proposal made to him. A truce was Kutuzov's sole means of gaining time, of giving Bagration's exhausted troops a rest, and of letting the transport, whose movements were concealed from the French, advance if but one stage nearer Znaim. The offer of truce gave the one, and totally unexpected, chance of saving the army. On receiving the news, Kutuzov immediately dispatched Adjutant General Winzengerode, who was attached to him, to the enemy camp. Winzengerode was not only to accept the truce, but also to propose terms of capitulation. Meanwhile, Kutuzov sent his adjutants back to hasten to the utmost the movements of the baggage train of the entire army along the Krems-Znaim road. Bagration's exhausted, hungry detachment, which alone was to cover this movement of the transport units and of the whole army, had to remain stationary in face of an enemy 8 times its strength. Kutuzov's expectations were correct both as to the proposals of capitulation, which were in no way binding, and afforded time for some of the transport units to pass, and as to Murat's blunder being very soon discovered. As soon as Bonaparte, who was at Schönbrunn, 25 versts from Hollabrunn, received Murat's dispatch and the proposals of a truce and capitulation, he detected the stratagem and dispatched the following letter to Murat. Schönbrunn, 25, Brumaire, 1805, at 8 o'clock in the morning. To Prince Murat, I cannot find words to express to you my displeasure. You command my advance guard only, and have no right to arrange an armistice without my order. You are causing me to lose the fruits of an entire campaign. Break the armistice at once, and march on the enemy. Inform him that the general who has signed the capitulation has no right to do so, that no one but the Emperor of Russia has the right. At any time, however, that the Emperor of Russia ratifies said convention, I will ratify it, but this is only a ruse. March on, destroy the Russian army. You are in position to take its baggage and artillery. The Russian Emperor's aide-de-camp officers are nothing when they have no powers. This one had none whatsoever. The Austrians let themselves be tricked at the crossing at the Vienna Bridge, and you are letting yourself be tricked by the Emperor's aide-de-camp. Napoleon. Bonaparte's adjutant galloped off at full speed with this intimidating letter to Murat. Bonaparte himself, not trusting his generals, moved with his entire guard to the field of battle, fearful of letting a ready victim escape. Meanwhile, the 4,000 men of Bagration's detachment were cheerfully building campfires, warming and drying themselves, cooking their gruel for the first time in 3 days, and not a single man in the entire detachment had any notion of what was in store for them. And I'm going to leave it off there. Thank you so much for watching. Please give it a thumbs up, a thumbs down, subscribe. You could, or just keep walking. Leave comments below, or keep watching, or do nothing and just keep watching. And I will see you in the next episode. Thank you for watching. Bye.